Hello, everyone. I am just getting our slides up. Okay, so welcome to week one of our creating our game plan for 2022. What we're going to do now is work through a 3-year projection. So I know it seems crazy right now with challenges in labor and challenges in food and all of the other things and uncertainty to even think about things beyond next week. But what I'm finding is by thinking about where we want to be 3 years from now, it can really help us visualize and keep sort of tunnel vision to make sure that the decisions we're making every day, in spite of the challenges, are heading us in the right direction. Because I think waiting till the perfect time, the risk is that we've made decisions that are not in line with our vision, right? And so even though we have all these challenges, and even though it's not going to be perfect between now and the end of the year, if we can look at where we are, look at where we want to go, it can really help us see and make sure that we're making the best use of our cash and best use of our operations today to get us where we want to be in the future. So as crazy as it is, what we're going to do is sort of take a step back this week first and really do some of that high level planning. And I know you're busy. I know you don't have time, but 30 minutes, right? Take 30 minutes to kind of look beyond and look forward so that way we can make sure that we're tracking and we're in line with where we want to go every week, right? That we're on that path. So think about it, right? If we're doing a sports analogy, you need a game plan, right? Whether you have a losing record or a winning record, you need a game plan. And every team, as bad as they are, goes into the next game with a game plan. I mean, I can tell you my son's baseball team in the spring was 0-12, but every week they practiced and they prepared and they had a plan for the next game, right? And we still lost, and that's okay. But the key is having that game plan. So for our business, even though things feel really bad and it feels like we're, up against it every week, we still need that plan. And that's what we're going to work on today so that next week we can know where we are and work on our scorecard and then ultimately our budget, because all three really go together. So what do we mean by creating a game plan? For some of us, this is going to seem a little foreign. Maybe we haven't done this in quite a while. Maybe we haven't done this since pre-COVID, right? And we've just sort of been living on the edge ever since and just day to day. But I really think it's time now to not worry that we didn't have a game plan last year or worry where things were last year, but really step back and say, where do we want to be next year? Where do we want to be 2 years from now? Where do we want to be 3 years from now? Because in most cases that we're seeing, you have plenty of cash, right? Cash is not the issue from the government programs. Even if margins are tight, you still have residual cash left over from PPP or ERTC or RRF, right? And the key is, what do we do with that cash? Because the other thing where cash might be from is the EIDL loan. So did we take these big loans to have that comfort of knowing I have enough cash? But what does that look like? What are we going to do with that cash to make sure that, again, it's in line with our long-term plan? So the key questions we really want to ask ourselves is our goal for our business, right? Is our goal for our business to be what our business is today? Or is our business today part of our ultimate goal, right? I have one location now, but my goal is 5 locations. I have one location now, but my goal is a food truck. I have 2 locations and I'm good and I want to sell in 3 years. Like, that's really where we want to find out where we are in terms of our goal for the future, for the business, and ultimately us as owners, right? Maybe it's, I want to make more money, right? I don't like how much money I make right now in the business, or I'm not able to make anything right now, but I know if I have another location, I'll be able to make more money. I, want to have more monthly revenue for my family. I want to pay back the money that I invested into the business originally. All of that can be part of this plan. Retirement, right? Is your plan to get out in 5 years? Is your plan to get out in 3 years? So all of this can be part of this plan that we're going to create. So let's take a moment, take 30 minutes when we're not in the business, trying to do 5 other things, turn off the phone, right? And let's just sit back and really try to create our plan. I don't know if you've ever done one or not, but I think vision boards are incredible. So I know this has nothing to do with a financial plan, but sometimes a visualization first can help us see. And I think doing one for your business is incredibly important, or you as the owner of your business is incredibly important, because part of this 3-year plan may be, what do you want to do in the business, right? Do you want to be operating a location? Do you want to have a management team? What is it that you want to do with your time 3 years from now when the business is bigger? Or is it that it sells and so you want to run as efficiently as possible? So in sports, we hear this a lot, that we have to be able to visualize our success, right? We can't go into a game unless we see us winning. And the same is true in business, right? What does success look like for this operation? Regardless of what you're faced with in the struggles, if you took a step back and saw it working out, what does that look like? What is it all works out, right? And defining that will really help us on the financial side when we create this plan, because having that vision is so important to making sure that if our vision is 10 locations, well, what are we going to do in the next 3 years to get there, right? Because there's never going to be a perfect time. It's always going to be challenges. We know this. So we really have to know what that is. So I would encourage you, you can Google online, like how to create a vision board. It sounds silly, but it actually really does help you see it, right? Because what you'll see is things that's on your board, the things you were drawn to, as well as the things you weren't, right? Maybe there's nothing on your board about cooking. So it clearly means that you don't want to be in the kitchen 3 years from now, and that's okay, right? But maybe there's stuff on your board about marketing, right? Maybe your new role is going to be more marketing driven, or maybe, there's things on your board for travel. Okay, well then we need a really good management team if you're not going to be there all the time. And that's okay, right? I've seen incredibly successful owners who are able to travel all over the place with their businesses running, but it takes time to get there. So we have to have our vision first so we know the direction we're going. So once we have our vision board, and whether you do one or not, I encourage you to do it. But if you don't, that's okay. We at least have to have that vision in our head. What we're going to do is I'm going to sort of toggle back between this and our sample. What we're going to do is we are going to create a 3-year projection. So these next slides, you may want to just print out, but it walks you through every step of this spreadsheet that we have. So the first thing we need to do is project next year. Now, for a lot of us, this year was still not normal, right? You know how long you were restricted in the spring, how off things were January, February, March, maybe things picked up in April. But when we look year to date, we know we're probably still having some of those lingering, COVID months. We also know food costs have been crazy. Labor is crazy. So we want to kind of bring that into what we think will happen next year. Right? We don't want to just assume next year goes back to 2019, but we're going to take what we know about this year and then project it into next year. So revenue projection, again, we don't know, but we could at least take your 8 months of sales as a monthly average and use that for 12 months going forward. Maybe we expect the fourth quarter to be strong. Whatever it is, it's a starting point, right? This isn't going to be perfect, but it's a starting point. Cost of goods percentage. Maybe we want to take, what we're running right now, assuming cost of goods are probably going to stay the same. On the other hand, if I know that I just raised my prices, maybe I could say that I'm going to go back a little bit because I just raised my prices. So I know that I've covered that additional cost. And labor, same thing, right? If we're raising rates and we didn't raise prices, then our labor percentage may be higher. Maybe we take an average. Again, this is a starting point. This is high level trying to go forward. On the operating expense side, we could take our monthly operating expenses that we know, our rent, our taxes, our equipment, our utilities, come up with a monthly fixed cost and then multiply by 12. That may be a starting point. Again, this is just a starting point because really where we're ultimately going to go is cash flow to see if this is what I do. Is that enough to make it work? So again, if I then come into I say for my revenue, I'm going to make this a little bigger. I'm at, 1.5 million. I'm going to run a 31% prime cost. My labor is going to run at 24%. Maybe I say, well, that's not really realistic. Maybe I want to go to 25%. Could be higher. No, this is just wages. The taxes will be in our operating expense, and then operating expense of 30%, but maybe I come up with the total again, divide that by 12. That would give me a 210,000 operating income. So wow, I mean, that's a fantastic year, right? So that's the first part, is just saying that I get to my operating income. What we'll see here is, again, so that's how we're going to fill it out. So we have all of our percentages, we have our operating income, things are great, right? The next thing that may have changed substantially since we started this is debt schedule, right? Did we take out a large EIDL loan? Did we take out other loans? Have we paid off debt? What does that look like? So what we mean by debt service is, if we go back to our spreadsheet, this is actually included on the link that I put in the course notes. We're going to take every loan. We're going to come up with our origination date, our maturity date, the original balance and the current balance, the interest rate, and our monthly payment. So what we want here is the monthly cost of our debt. So again, there's been some great programs. The EIDL is going up to 2 million starting October 8th. But what we want to see is, if we take the 2 million, what will that do to my monthly debt service? How much will it cost me to have that debt? And again, those loans are fantastic, but they're over 30 years. So we want to plan for the fact that that means that we're going to be making those payments every year for the next 30 years. So once we have this monthly debt, our projection here would be our monthly payments times 12. So if I had 200,000 in annual debt service, that means that I'm really saying that I have about 16,000 a month in debt. So that's really where we're going to come up with it. Maybe that's more, maybe that's less. But again, factoring in the EIDL advance, all of that is going to be our debt service. So if this were my sample, then my net income is 10,000, right? So that really means to me that if I took out this debt, now it may make sense depending on my cash balance, I just pay some of it off and I get my debt service down. But the other thing that might be telling me is I need more revenue, right? If I'm going to have this debt service, then I need my business to grow. I need an additional something, right? And that's really then where our focus goes. So we did our debt service. So now step 4 is, what is my growth plan, right? Now, again, I may say I don't want to do growth, but maybe I want to pay down my debt, get my debt service to 100,000, and that's okay too, right? But if I do want to grow, I really need to think about what that looks like. What are those key growth areas that I could have on the schedule? So if I'm in year 1 and I'm at my 200,000 and I get down here is just consolidated, you'll see how this works out in a second. But if we get down to 10,000, the next piece is my cash flow. So now what we're going to do is really take a look at, okay, so if I start the year at 500,000 and then I know now from looking here that I want to start acquisition. So maybe I want another location. How much is that going to cost me? Well, if I start at 500,000 and I spend 400,000 on acquisition, not even on my existing debt. And now remember, I'm going to have a tax liability because my taxable income is the 210. I paid down loans, but my taxable income is 210. So I'm going to owe 50,000 in taxes, which means that with my operating income, now my projected ending cash is 57.5, which means I really need this second location to work out. But once it does, and again, this is where it's the best use of your cash, right? Because I took that 400,000 cash and I'm investing it into new location because I want more revenue, right? So now with the same margin as I had above, and my labor costs and my operating costs, now I have additional 132,000 in revenue. But in this case, because of the cash balance that I have and I self-finance, because remember I took that 400,000 and spent it in year 1, I've self-financed. So now my bottom line looks much better, right? So now with that additional amount, I'm able to pay for my debt and still have profit. And now I'm in great shape. So that was the best use of all of this cash. Now, again, you may say, I don't want another location. I don't want another headache. I'm going to take 500,000 and I'm going to pay down some debt to get my debt service better. And then I can just be cash flow positive in my current location. That's fine, right? But we need to decide. We need to make a decision, because hanging on to the cash may not help us if we can't sustain the monthly debt service. Otherwise, it's just eroding itself to a point where it becomes a problem. So that's where focusing on this, coming up with our strategy tells us where we are going and where we need to go. Now, maybe then I decide, okay, well, I know my area. I know that I want this location here. It's a small location. It won't take long. Maybe it's tasting room, whatever. But then, there's a location on the road. And that would be where I really want to go, because that one's bigger and it has blah, blah, blah. So then we would want to put that in for year 3, right? Because ultimately in my vision board, I want a restaurant on every corner, whatever it is, but that's my vision. So my vision is beyond the next location, going further. What does that do? Well, that, changes the game, right? Now things are really working out. But as much as this may seem pie in the sky, without this target, without this plan, it would be very hard to get there, right? All of the businesses that you see that survive and get to, 5 locations and really, have these, huge growth spans, it's because they had a plan to do it first, right? It doesn't just happen. And so if we believe that this is where we want to go, then we really need to build the plan to get there. Because if we don't want the additional growth, then maybe all of these loans that we've been given, we don't need, right? Because to take the loan and have it just sit in our operating account will probably not help us if our business can't sustain the monthly payment. Because what we don't want to happen is just this erodes, right? And our cash balance erodes and our cash balance gets worse in the next 3 years. We want a cash balance that's either going down because we're self-financing or going down because we're growing and we know that it's coming and we're going to open another location next year, right? We just don't want it going down because it's going down and there really isn't a plan. So I hope this helps. These slides, like I said, will walk through those steps that we talked about, that really coming up with our longer term projections are going to be very important. So again, this slide walks you through the year 2 and the year 3 projection. What do we think happens in sales? What do we think happens with our acquisition? And then ultimately, our consolidated now, in 2023, we have another location. We have existing growth of 5%. And, one guy mentioned 5% growth in a restaurant really means you raise prices by 25 cents, right? It doesn't even necessarily mean there's 5% more people coming in the door. That just really is keeping up with the costs of, inflation and things like that. So 5%, I think, is a pretty fair year over year. The revenue is just going to go up a little bit, and then factoring in these other areas of growth, areas of revenue that we can get to add to our bottom line. So your homework assignment this week, and again, this will all make sense because next week we're going to go back to our fundamentals to say, in our projections, the key things that we have are these costs of goods and labor. So are the projections that we have in line with what we're running right now? Because if we're going to be growing and we're going to be creating these brands, then we need to make sure that we have a very efficient prime cost. So what we're going to be doing next week is really dialing back to today to make sure that we're on the same path as our game plan for tomorrow. So the homework assignment this week, I think this is a fun one. And I think I encourage you, again, turn off the phone. Don't do it in the back of the restaurant or back of the office, but really somewhere where you can think to say, based on everything you've learned in the last 18 months, where do you see yourself 3 years from now, right? What have you learned and what have you seen in your brand development to say that, I want 3 more locations. I want 1 more location. I just want to be free and clear of the debt that I put into this business and to know that I'm just, in a great position debt-wise and could sell and walk away. There's lots of different avenues, but we have to know where we want to go first before that we can really start to build these projections. So I would do the vision board if you can. If it's too much, just sit back and at least close your eyes and see 3 years from now, because 3 years is going to happen. It's going to go like that, right? Think of how quickly the last 18 months went. It's not that long of time, but really coming up with that clear vision will help us build this plan. And then the second step would be build the 3-year projection. There's going to be things you don't know, but I promise by doing it, it will be very clear where you want to go at the end of it. You will see Is it realistic to say I want another location? Or do I want to expand catering? Or, are there food trucks? Whatever it is, you're going to learn a lot from doing this exercise. So please try it, try your best. We will touch on it next week as well as bring it back to where we are today and how we are with our plan. So again, if you struggle with it, if it's hard, if you're a Largo client, set up a time. We can do this together. This will not take long. It's actually a really fun exercise, and it can be very enlightening to make sure that we see the vision that we're trying to achieve. If you're not a Largo member, there's a small fee, but we can do it together just the same. I think it's incredibly valuable to make sure that we're all on the same path and moving forward into the best 2022 that we can possibly have. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you next week.